We're going to have a panel now with one owner. Arnold Wood from the Halifax International Airport Authority was very, very gracious and agreed to join the panel. We've got a couple of constructors who are going to join the panel. We've got a couple of practitioners. Joe Zareski, I hope you're here. I haven't seen you. Where is he? Really? Okay. Karen? 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 Like I said. All right. I'm going to talk to you. Okay, so Joe can't make it. I didn't think so. All right, so let's invite our panelists up. We've got Tom Strong from Ellis Don, Steve Thorne from Bird Construction. For any of you who went on the tour yesterday, Steve did a very good presentation on the work that they did at ProCycle. None of us left with a motorcycle, but that's probably quite good. Arnold, of course, from Halifax International Airport. Joe, who's going to owe us big time, who's not here. You sure, Karen? Okay. All right. And, of course, Ray Gallant, who we heard from just a few moments ago. The theme of this whole event was, why not BIM, exclamation mark. And, the words behind that were to get everybody in a room, the owners, the practitioners, the contractors and constructors, to start having a very vigorous conversation about why not BIM. And part of that is identifying the obstacles to beginning to transition to. As somebody said, BIM is not a destination, it's a journey. I remember years and years and years ago sitting down with the folks at what are now Architecture 49, WHW, and John Cray said to me, he said, Dave, look, our goal is to create BIM competency within this firm in 2 years. I circled back and talked to John about 4 or 5 years later, and I said, how's that 2-year plan coming along? He says, it's really, really great, but 2 years happens to look an awful lot like 4 or 5 years. The key there was they are still committed, they're still going at it, and it's definitely something that they've been focused on for a very, very long time. All right. I prepared a few questions for this panel, but I talked to Arnold earlier. Halifax International Airport embarked a couple of years ago on what I think is a very aggressive plan to start taking advantage of a lot of the tools and technologies and processes that we've heard about today. Arnold's had some experience with that. He's realized some wins. He's realized a couple of hiccups along the way. So I asked Arnold if he could kind of take us through the last couple of years of thinking that led him to start down that path and to kind of share a little bit about where he is today. And then we'll kind of jump into, okay, what are the challenges to keep this moving forward? So Arnold, if you could start, that'd be great.
All right. Thanks, Dave. A little bit of background about the airport. It's built in the 60s, of course, and it's hundreds of iterations of projects, many large ones, mostly small ones. So the condition of the building and the known drawings and records about it are various age, and some that can be trusted, others that can't. So as we designed iteratively through the years and built, each project got recorded and we moved on. A lot of the things that we've been happening since my involvement in 2000 was the large-scale expansion after Transport Canada handed the terminal over to a private group. So through that process, we pushed out 3 times multi-million-dollar projects of large scale. And some of the challenge that we faced was that we have record drawings, and we passed them out to the consulting team, and they would design, and we would write our specs fairly tightly to have them come and inspect, but some things can't be known. So at the end of the day, the contractors arrive, and it was change order after change order after change order. And then through the process of finishing the design and construction process and getting those record drawings back, and then handing those out to the next team, we got into this iterative processes of, huge multi-million-dollar change orders through the projects, based on best intentions of all parties involved, because of the age of the structure and multiple tenants that no longer exist, like airlines that built stuff and their last records are never provided to us. We would always find something that was never on the design drawings. So several years ago, we started when we put our first baggage system in with an international company who was designing in 3 dimensions. So they would design this whole thing in 3D, and then we would model it, test it with computer systems, and so you could see the power of designing everything in advance. And that was, and then we did a next iteration of baggage systems just several years ago that we finished last year. Again, international firms designing in 3D, their as-built is a 3D model that you can flip and turn and zoom in on a bolt and touch it and find out what the bolt, the part number. So the power of that technology became evident to us through these engagements with stakeholders. So we wanted to apply that to our building as well. So the problem is that we have the building, so this as-found condition is never what we hoped it to be, so we need to aid the designers in getting a better picture of our facility so that, selfishly, my goal was to reduce change orders, right? Because we were getting 30% change orders on a multi-million-dollar project. That's just a waste of money, and we could have built something else, bigger facilities, or for less money. So one of the things we started a pilot project just on scanning, something simple. For instance, a drainage system that had burst over many years, and it's like a subdivision that keeps growing, but the main pipe going down to the waterfront stays the same size. Eventually it busted, so we had to, our pilot project was to scan that infrastructure and then to reverse engineer it so that we could find out what's there, then design against that. So based on that small win, then we moved on to some larger projects where we would send a scanning team in advance. In addition, with the design drawings we provided, the as-built drawings that we had, gave that to the consultant team so that they would have, our as-builts and then the scans so that they could actually create an as-found model to do a 3D design. So the challenge with going to this new process is that we just started this 3 years ago. It takes, as we all know, about 2 years to go through a construction project. So the iterations of each process take a lot of time to realize the benefits. So we're in the middle of this process now by adopting this. We're already seeing benefits by improved drawings where they have been improved. We're also finding challenges with the resource level of some of our consultant teams in the city, because many times it's not necessarily the company but the people assigned. So at times we'll meet principals of consultant firms when you describe what you're looking for instance, in a BIM process or a 3D design. Being exposed to it, that you can draw in 3D, you can attach all the asset information to all those elements. You can cut the drawing and look at any section that you want. But when you describe that to some principals, their CAD technician needs to be in the room and say, oh yeah, I can do that. And where the design consultant firms don't know the capabilities within their own teams and within the industry. And the airport authority, we go to RFP for design teams. We never hire, it's rare that we hire the lowest price on a design team. We're always looking for the best team. So some of the challenges we see in the industry as of right now, although we had some great presentations today, is trying to find a consistency for us to ways to specify what we want so that the requirements are clear to the teams bidding on the design so that they can work with us and partner with us so we can actually put the next level of specifications out to the contractor team so that they can actually work with us to get that ultimate goal that we're speaking about today so that we can truly use all the full benefits of BIM 3D design and on to facility management. That's my answer.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Sorry, I was just writing some notes here. All right. So here we are today, and you've taken some steps. I know you've put out some tenders that had a requirement to collaborate in 3D. The airport has provided their as-built record BIM model, asked the consultants to design to that. To this point today, how would you describe your experience in having gone down that? What are some of the little wins that you've had in there? You did mention, better drawings, but what are some of the challenges that you've experienced along the way as you've tried to bring that community, the design community, the fabricators, to bring them alongside your vision?
Because of being an airport, you sometimes can't find all the disciplines you want in one design team for one company. So a lot of the time we have a collaboration of mechanical engineers, design engineers, all from different companies, sometimes with an airport planner not in the province. So there's lots of e-collaboration sites that are being used to share drawings, and those are quite successful, but usually it's all 2D drawings traded, you know, concept by the architect, structural guy takes over, mechanical, electrical's last, and through that 2D drawing interaction, you get so far as we've always had, but within an old building, it's another challenge on top. So some of the consultants that we've hired are still drawing in 2D, and then, you know, sort of converting it to 3D just to meet the deliverable requirement.
Right.
And then when we ask for a cross-section through an area for an RFI response, they say, oh, I've got to draw that, it'll take a week.
Right.
Instead of doing a cut through the model that we thought we had. And some of the challenges are our own internal tools, where we don't have all the technology that exists to actually check what they're doing. So that's some of the challenge that we're seeing. And other firms that we're using, it's coming along well, but it's you don't know what to expect because you don't know people's capabilities.
Right.
And if you can't demonstrate your requirements clearly and clearly, then every time you hire somebody, we're getting different experience every time.
You're training them over again, so to speak.
Yeah, and there was comments before, but the owners in the city aren't looking for BIM and 3D. We are. We've got 2 more projects coming out this year.
Good to know. Excellent. All right, I got a couple more questions for you, Arna, that we'll come back to. But let's start down at the end of the table with Ray. I'm going to turn the question around, and we mentioned it earlier, you know, what can we do as practitioners, as constructors, to put our heads together, and instead of, shall we say, waiting for the owners, what can we do as an industry to approach owners and convince them, shall we say, that there is benefit to using these tools, these processes, these methodologies, understanding that, you know, procurement methodologies is going to be a bit of a challenge, the design, bid, build, you know, asking people to put investment up front when they're not sure that it's going to be rewarded with a contract. But having said that, I'd like to start with Ray and ask him to kind of share some ideas with us. You know, if Ray had access to every owner in Atlantic Canada, how would he engage them in a discussion around, let's start considering the use of BIM on our project? So let's start with Ray, and we'll go up the aisle.
I think in my experience, owners have a very easy set of goals to, or they strive for a very simple set of goals, right? Lower cost, quicker turnaround, more effective management, less headaches from tenants. That's kind of the, you know, if I see Arnold shaking his head, yes. So I think those are kind of 4 of the primary goals. We're somewhat fortunate because we had some experience in BIM. We've actually been able to, we can show them some direct results. We can show them some schedules that we've crashed and reduce the time for construction. We can show them some of our facility management techniques. So we actually just use the demonstration side is the most effective for us. And you know, most people who are fortunate enough to be owners of buildings are generally very smart people. And it doesn't take a lot of convincing to do. The only problem is we're often, as the contractor, involved at a later stage of the design process. So I think it's more, you know, from our perspective, we need to get in their ear earlier, you know, when they're at, you know, concept stage, like, I think I should build a building. I have a piece of land. That's when we need to be there. Or in the airport's case, we do a lot of work at the airport, but oftentimes we're the trade contractor. We're the last guy in.
Right.
So by the time I see Arnold, it's when something's happened during design and we're asking for a giant change order. Right. And you know, so it's really education from our perspective. It's being involved earlier in the process.
It sounded like a little bit like a promotion for IPD, Integrated Project Delivery, but that's another whole conversation. But the key takeaway, I think, from Ray's message there is encouraging owners, procurement methodologies aside, but encouraging owners in some way, shape, or form to engage the consultants much earlier in the shall we say, the project genesis, to start having those discussions about better ways of doing things. So I don't know how we can achieve that, you know, in a traditional design, bid, build, procurement methodology, but that's kind of the challenge I threw out to the floor at the beginning. You know, are there ways that we can operate in that kind of environment where the consultants who are putting their intellectual property at risk, shall we say, by having these conversations with owners, knowing that they may not get the project? So, bit of a difficult spot to be in. Thanks, Ray. Tom, I mean, you representing Ellis Don, I mean, this has been something that your firm's been involved with for a very, very, very long time. You know, maybe you can share some insights as to how you've engaged owners and had a discussion around, hey, we'd like to do a project this way. What are your thoughts? I mean, it's kind of a simplified view of it, but, you know, maybe share some stories of how that's happened for you.
Yeah, so we, to Ray's point, we really like the design assist model and to engage our subcontractors as early in the process as possible, especially when there's a lot of complexity. But that's only possible when we have a contract type that allows us to do that. So we also like to get involved during pre-construction. We like CM. A lot of the work, a lot of the big work in Ontario and BC and Alberta has gone P3 now. And the design build model is extremely efficient for encouraging collaboration. It's very good for thinking outside of the box because in that scenario, we're actually an owner. We hold equity for 30 years in these engagements. So we're very interested in managing that building very efficiently. And we look at life cycling and durability of the building very closely. So, you know, we want to use best-in-class approaches and tools and technologies to evaluate the design the best way we possibly can, and BIM naturally fits into that very well. It also, the design build, you know, we partner with our suppliers, so you know, we have a shared pain, shared gain scenario with them where, you know, their success is our success, and aligning those financial incentives helps to, you know, align everyone's perspective and getting everybody working together. The challenge with design build often is that, you know, the owners are disconnected from what they've specified. They work up front to say, okay, we want this hospital, this is how many beds, this is the type of systems we want, this is the performance we want, you know, this is the reaction time we want you to react in this amount of time to a facilities management issue or whatever the case is. But they can't be involved directly with and, you know, providing direct input into the design until the project is awarded to the preferred proponent. Which is challenging for owners. So, you know, there's different projects require different approaches. Airports we've been involved with have gone CM because it's open book for us. Like you know, the owner can come in and look at any line in the budget, look at any email, look at anything they want, and we're just working on their behest to manage the risk for them. So for airport work and public infrastructure work that's very complex, that requires a lot of owner input, CM's a good model. For projects where you want to drive a competitive process, but you want to drive also the private sector collaboration, innovation. Design build P3 is very good. The P3 is very good for you know, offloading the financial burden from the public entity or whatever the case is. We don't like lump sum. I mean, lump sum is very difficult. You know, it's getting more and more competitive. There's a lot of lump sum work that still happens in Halifax, and it's very difficult to be innovative. It's difficult to staff the jobs correctly. It's difficult to implement technology. It's difficult to hire the most sophisticated company in the supply chain that can actually participate and work in 3D to proactively coordinate the project. So, you know, I think lump sum it's a difficult model. Even with lump sum as well, if the consultants have you know, worked together and used Revit, for example, to coordinate the project, often we can't get our hands on that data and those models for our purposes downstream because it's perceived as risk, and that's just not in the best interest of the project. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, what kind of comes to mind for me, you know, kind of thinking about it from Arnold's perspective, you know, if we take Atlantic Canada and we take Nova Scotia as a bit of a backdrop for this conversation, you know, we know that the adoption of BIM by the practitioners and the constructors isn't as advanced, in some cases doesn't exist at all, isn't advanced as much as we'd like to see it. We've seen examples where it is. Of course, Atlantic Mechanical is a good example of that. You know, so with that in mind, Arnold, you know, when you look to advance your program within Halifax International Airport, where, you know, eventually you would like to know that more and more of the folks that are going to eventually work on your projects are ready, willing, and able to collaborate in BIM and so on and so forth. Until we get to that point, what do you think as an owner you can do to encourage that to happen? I mean, what are your thoughts on, you know, reaching out to the community and saying, hey, this is Halifax International Airport. This is the direction we're going. We need you to come along with us. You know, how do you know, what's your thoughts on that and how to bring them along?
Well, we've had construction management at the airport for quite a long stint because of operating a complex facility and works quite effectively. But on most of our project, our mainstay of work, is lump sums. So we look to a way to work with the consultant community to have specifications so that we can actually hire the services so that we can get those benefits of BIM. So to allow that, it all starts with good design and good information, and if we can remove the risk from the contractors. So, I'd like to get to a position where we could actually tender the 3D design so that it can be, here it is. If you can find innovation in your way of building it, but we need something that's constructible, designed in 3 dimensions, so if cross-sections, RFIs can be answered by knowledgeable trades and knowledgeable contractors. And that also gives them an edge, just like when you find mistakes on 2D drawings and when you bid it, there's something there. It's an extra later. That also provides a way of knowing the risks associated with the projects and contract rights so that, it is a fair and open book so that they can bid it effectively and make money. Because at the end of the day, we want people to make money, be effective so we get bid again. So, we want people to to make money at the airport when they bid it, both the consulting teams and also the contractors, because otherwise they won't come back.
Right.
Or prices go up. But we do need the product, both the design product, the as-builts, the commissioning, and all that plays into this BIM model because all those information is already known and being used by different entities. But the end user, it's a design product that gets put on a shelf or stored in your file, but we rarely get the use and benefit of it except for the operating manuals, right? And now we get them on a stick instead of in a binder. And so a lot of the information that's being used isn't getting to the end user.
Right. A very good friend of mine, Dino Lustri, is a design engineering manager at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. And they did a really interesting thing a couple of years ago when they started down a similar path. They brought in all of the partners that they had worked with over the years on various different projects, from small to large, and basically put everybody in a room together and said, here's our vision of where we want to go. And they talked about it in stages, their own process of maturing in terms of the use and expectations for the technology. And they kind of laid out a roadmap for their consultants as to where they were going, where they wanted their consultants to reach a level of capability and competency so that they could increasingly ask for more in their tenders, right? So it was a really, really effective way. And if you ever get a chance, look up his name, Dino Lustri. He works for, as I said, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. It was a great way for them to reach out to the community and kind of tell the community, we're going this way, so we're looking for people to join us. So I think that's kind of what I heard Arnold say, that to communicate to the stakeholders that this is the direction we're going. So I'd like to come back to that a little bit later on. Mr. Thorne, Bird Construction. You folks have done an awful lot of work in this province. I know in particular, you've talked to a lot of your clients about your own capabilities, why you use BIM. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those experiences in dealing with owners. Some of the university clients that you deal with, talk about, how that's worked out for you and, what kind of response you're hearing.
Yeah, sure. One of the things we found with some of those clients is really, when it comes to owners, they don't have a clear sense of where they're going with it. So when you don't have a finished product to get to, and I think that's a process and a problem sometimes with all of BIM, is especially for facilities maintenance, if you don't know where you're going, it's tough to get there. So they also have heard from various people that there's a cost. So for us, it's up to us to sort of explain to them, when you have clients, especially like Arnold, that make decisions more based on the best team, you'll typically find that you get cost savings because you didn't pick it based on a cost number, but you'll get cost savings in the end, and you'll have improved drawings. So when they understand basically a process of what I consider, start to finish BIM, there's savings there for everybody, but there's savings that's definitely back to the owner. And that's kind of what we're getting to now, is just trying to communicate that, throughout the process, we're going to utilize it, the architect's going to utilize it, you can utilize it, all the way through to the finish to handoff. Similar in some ways to what Ellis Dawn had presented, was a great workflow there with the arrow on the way at the end. At the end, they got it out to Maximo. I think that that's truly BIM, and that's, you know, what we need to be sure of, though, is that we all work in a way that we're not having to backstep and add data. We're building on the data. We're going forward so that in the end, it's not an extra cost for anybody because everybody's utilizing it. It's a team thing, and I think that is a great thing for owners to understand, because as we grow with it, owners will also benefit, but so will everybody. So it's not just a sell job for the end product.
Right. One of the things that we saw Ellis Dawn put up earlier is this thing called the BIM execution plan. And, you know, we're all, most of us, I'm sure, pretty familiar with the BIM execution plan. It is such an essential element of your transition to the use of BIM, not just for design and capital construction, but ultimately for facility management. Because as Steve pointed out, within that BIM execution plan, right up front, you're thinking about what you need out of that, you know, to operate your facility. So speaking to the practitioners here, in your conversations with, you know, with owners, how much emphasis are you putting on that whole conversation around having a BIM execution plan? Know where you're going, know what your inputs are, know what your outputs are, based on, you know, how you want to use that model post-construction. So let's start with Ray.
Nova Center, as an example, partnership with Ellis Dawn, Argyle Developments. That was one of the tactics that was discussed right out of the gates. That was something Mr. Ramia said. I want facility management, and I want the best facility management, and I want, you know, ideally, you know, it's going to be a competitive process, but, you know, if we built it, we understand it, and we have a BIM model, we should probably be the most competitive contractor to provide that service. Right. But he had that vision, I guess, to Steve's point. He had that vision. He wanted a general construction manager that knew how to use sub-trades to get that in the end, and he wanted sub-trades that were capable of providing it, and that's one of the best examples I can think of.
Okay. Tom, in your engagement with clients, you know, how soon in your conversation does that, you know, element come up, you know, the BIM execution plan, whether you call it that or some other thing, having a plan?
It really depends on the client and the client's experience with BIM. We use BIM on all of our work, so that's standard practice for us. It's how we operate. It's what we do. When we have a kickoff meeting with our consultants and when we bring on our trades, we sit down with them and we work through all the details of how all the information will get generated so it can coalesce and be integrated. Sometimes we have very sophisticated clients, like data center clients often have a specification that they bring to the table saying, this is what we want as an end deliverable. We want a model in IFC format or Revit or whatever the case is. This is how we want the families generated with the parameters and whatnot. These are the kind of asset codes we want. And then they know in advance that they want that, the structure of those models to match all of their data centers, say, all over the world. And they'll have a system that all these models sit in or are hosted online. And then we have, you know, the opposite of that, where the client has no clue what BIM is, and we come in and say, hey, like, we think best practices is maintaining a BIM of your asset. We think that makes sense. If you're going to maintain a building, maintain the information about your asset. It's important. And we self-perform facilities management, and it's something that we take very seriously throughout the whole planning process on these P3 projects, on making sure we capture the data as it's being exchanged and it's flowing over the course of the project, and organizing it and uploading it to a system for the purpose of being maintained for that 30-year duration or whatever the case is. So yeah, the execution plan it's part of our operating procedure now when we kick off a project.
Great, excellent. Arnold, when you started down this path several years ago, you had an internal dialogue, you know, with your stakeholders and, you know, folks who, you know, are very much involved in, you know, when you start down a path, a new initiative. Can you kind of share with us, you know, where you started out in terms of that conversation, where you are today with your, shall we say, internal stakeholders? What are some of the challenges you're experiencing internally to keep moving forward with this initiative that, you know, we as an industry need to work with you to help solve?
Well, our operations department again wants to, you know, run the cheapest
building possible, of course. And so we've always done energy analysis, and we've already have a building automation system that tracks all of our mechanical, electrical system. We've got meters on our pumps and things like that, so we can see where our energy is being used. We were switching over to LED lights. We have Maximo to take care of our building. You know, we've got an asset management system. In Maximo, we've got an input guy that puts all the assets in. We specify that Maximo output. We specify 3D drawings. So we're coming down that path, but what we're finding the challenge is standardization of specifications and requirements so that the industry can clearly see what we need, and trying to find those standard documents in the area. We always have to go and meet a person at a conference, like San Francisco's doing it, York University's doing it. We're trying to, you know, copy and paste other people's documents to try to get that from others. And then the challenge is we put something out in the street, and then it's different from what we're doing here in Halifax. It would be nice if we're all on the same page and share these processes that we're doing and saying, all right, here's how we standardly do it as a consultant team, as you know, technical contractors. Here's what we're doing. Why don't we all just share this information and do what we're already doing and do it the same way every time? We've been in contact with the owners group, Public Works, the hospitals, and just trying to share specifications so that we're all, you know, when we get around the table and talk about consultants and contractors, you know, we're telling the same stories about, you know, wins that we have and common gaps where we're trying to make things the same. So we're sharing specifications so that we can get consistency in the ask to the consultant team, so that they, you know, provide the same product to all the major, you know, owners and around the city that come back to them and ask for projects over and over again. Right. So I think standardization in how we do things, so that to do BIM is good business, and it's how we should be doing it anyway, and so that the owner can ask for what you already do well, so that the work product that you do actually gets passed on to the owner, and not just in, you know, 3P and design build and all these big projects that aren't the bread and butter of work in Halifax. If we do the same thing for the bread and butter projects, then we're all, you know, consistent at that level.
Right. The and I hear that a lot. Everybody, you know, hospital is a hospital and airport's an airport. And while there are certainly similarities in terms of what owners expect from, you know, a BIM-enabled construction process project, you know, the subtleties around those standardization of documents. I know, and I'll talk to you about this after the meeting. Massachusetts Port Authority. I know it's the U.S. and I'm not an airport kind of guy, so I don't know what regulatory issues would create enough difference. Massachusetts Port Authority put out their BIM specification, their BIM execution plan, what they expect from their contractors, pre-construction, post, all the rest of that stuff. So they went through the trouble and the effort to create the BIM execution plan, those standardized set of construction requirements, design requirements, and they published it and they make it freely available. You can actually go to the Mass Port Authority website and download their entire BIM execution plan. I don't know, maybe that's a great starting point for your internal team to kind of look at that and say, hey, does that fit for us? And tweak it, twist it, and turn it, whatever. And they, like I said, the lady who I spoke to, who's the head of their design group, said, absolutely, you know, give me Arnold's name and, you know, I'll reach out to him and offer whatever we can to help guide in that. But having those standardization documents, as you said, allows all of the contractors to be consistent in what your expectations are and their understanding of that. So those things are available. I'd like to open the floor to a few questions. You folks have been pretty quiet so far today, but we got a really great panel up here today. So we've got about 13 minutes left. I've got a bunch more questions, but I'd sooner see some questions from the audience. So the bar doesn't open for another 45 minutes. So. All right, I'm gonna ask another question, and I'm gonna kind of direct this to the entire panel. one of the things we wanted to try and come out of this meeting with today was a set of clear action items. What, you know, and I don't mean specific to any one individual, but kind of at a very high level holistically, what can we do as a community in Nova Scotia, you know, to bring owners and the practitioners and the constructors together to continue having this conversation about how do we start to understand each other's needs, how do we start to understand better what we're capable of delivering, what we're ready for, and so on and so forth, putting in place the steps that will raise the capability and the competency of local firms to match an owner's vision of where they want to go with their facility, not just for design and construction, but operation. I had some ideas that you know, I wanted to kind of toss out there and get some feedback from the group here. Several years ago, I attempted to start back then what I called the Atlantic BIM User Group, very specific, not to mention Revit or anything like that. But I think it was Tom or Pietro I was talking to earlier. You know, or no, actually it was Kirby. You know, when we say user group, it sounds too technical. It sounds too software or focused. So I wanted to make a suggestion here, and if I could find my notes, I'll tell you what that was. Yeah. To create something that leverages existing organizations. So we've got Building Smart Canada and all the work that they're doing with owners. I know they have an owners community. I see John Hale waving his hand back there. We know CanBIM has an owners committee. We've got the membership organizations who, again, we tried to involve in this meeting. NSAA, we just happened to pick a week that they're having their AGM and meeting as well. So they all wanted to be here but couldn't. SENS, you know, we had Nick Tobin from the Consulting Engineers of Nova Scotia. I'd like to propose at least an idea and get some feedback that we create an advocacy group. I'm going to call it the, you know, Atlantic BIM Advocacy Group. We could pick another name. But really to continue this dialogue today, to get owners and, you know, the design, the practitioner community together and continue these conversations to really help educate each other. So I'm going to toss that out as an idea, and I'm going to ask the audience to provide some feedback on that. Wow, what a quiet group. John, I'm going to pick on you. Oh, sorry. All right, Mark, hold on.
I wanted to throw out the idea of, you know, when we use like terms like advocacy group or something like that, it makes it more complicated than it really needs to be.
Okay.
Why not we just set up a meetup? It's like $250 a year, and we could just meet on a regular basis once a month and could carry these discussions forward, and that takes out the whole user group aspect of things. It's simple. It's beyond simple as a way to do it, but I think it takes away sort of the complication of having these formal groups and titles and trainings and certifications and all that. It just gets us at the table and talking.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Mark. Eric. Oh, John sent you up here. I was going to get... all right, so maybe, Eric, you could talk about what Building Smart is doing to interface with owners and so on and so forth. So talk to us a little bit about that. Sorry, hold on, Eric. I don't know if everybody can hear. Is that microphone on?
It is now.
I think the battery died.
So I didn't touch on, I touched on it very briefly, but Building Smart has the affiliates program. So we have the Calgary BIM community, Edmonton BIM community, BIM BC, and so this is exactly something that we'd support in terms of developing an Atlantic BIM community, and we were saying ABC. That'd be great. And so,
I thought A-Bag was pretty good.
We'll work on the name, but basically it's exactly this type of effort we're trying to support in terms of having the grassroots local meetup where, you know, this discussion is open. It's not just Revit centric. It's been anything best practices in construction, and you know, getting that back and forth and leveraging this community to advance the whole effort in Canada. I don't know, John, if you want to add anything.
I just wanted to add the owners part. There's two questions there in the floor. I just heard you talking the owners thing. I like the ABC idea. It's brilliant. Atlantic BIM community. If anybody in the room wants to join, let's let's get some groundswell support and get it done. We have other, the Building Smart Canada, we have some affiliate programs already established, other cities, and I think it's, we have nothing in this region. So I think it's time. So, and ABC, it's got a good ring to it. ABC's a BIM. So, on the owner side, I just want to give a shout out to Arnold. He's joined. We've set up an owners committee on Building Smart Canada, and jointly with CanBIM, and we've had some struggles. And hearing the kind of the discussion around the table, I'm part of D&D, and we struggle as an owner to understand how to do BIM. And we have joined up with other owners, and we all collectively struggle to understand or establish a knowledge base for BIM. So it's something we really got to work on, and I think it's really going to help us set direction. But working together, hearing this feedback is invaluable, and anything this community has to share, it'd be great.
Thanks, John. Over the last 8 or 10 years of myself just banging around in this marketplace, one thing that consistently comes to the forefront is what I would call awareness. Various different owners and the consultants all either have different understandings of what BIM is or don't understand it at all. So one of the things that I think is essential that we come out of today's meeting with, whatever the forum is for creating that dialogue, is that right up front, certainly in a community or a region like Atlantic Canada, where shall we say the adoption and use of BIM isn't as far advanced as other places in Canada or the world, to me there has to be a very strong element of creating awareness and understanding of what BIM is in ways that owners understand that, in the way that practitioners understand the owner's expectations. So whatever we do, to me, I think a real key part of that has to be an ongoing program of creating awareness and understanding of what BIM is, that it's not just 3D modeling, it's not this, it's not that. It is a whole bunch of things that when tied together, creates better project outcomes, and certainly for owners, the big payback comes, for facility management. So that's just kind of my 2 cents worth. Homer.
This is a bit high for me. Thanks. Arnold, thank you for being a tech-savvy owner and on this panel. Now, my question to you, I had a discussion once with a designer, and the discussion went along the lines of, BIM is great, and it really forces you to do a lot up front, but at the same time, owners balk at the front loading of a cost schedule, where a bulk of the design cost is up front, where a lot of the coordination happens in BIM, as opposed to throughout the construction process. So what's your perspective on that?
I'll just give a couple small examples by, for instance, if we have to create better drawings by scanning our building in advance, change orders, for mechanical systems and electrical systems, when you have problems that are clearly not the contractor's fault, they start at 50 grand. So I think we were into change orders on the last big project, was a $50 million project. Change orders were 9 million, right? Some were scope changes, but most weren't. And just because of, we didn't know that beam was there, or we didn't know that was there. Now, we're an old building, right? And so this isn't greenfield construction. So the benefits to actually having better information up front, taking longer to do a model, to do a design, that's going to make the job go quicker, because I get beat to get it done faster. And then I get beat because it costs so much. So I'd rather get beat because it came in under budget and it took what it was always going to take. So, we strive to have the right product, because sometimes it's just a matter of planning the design process a little quicker. I mean, it's rare to be told we've got to do something in 6 months. I mean, right now we're doing some non-passenger screening. We got told we had to do it in 3 months, and we did, and we pulled out all the stops. But most projects, there's a financial reason to do it, return on investment, there's planning in place. So it's just a matter of putting your project schedule out so that we're going to do this and we're going to save money later. And we're willing to spend the money to do it right. It's just a matter of setting up the project team, the design consultant, specifying it right. And, I find a lot of owners enter a vacuum where we're not like a consultant teams where you've got 6, 10, 20 projects at the same time in different phases, and you do this all the time. You're churning jobs out, and it's all depending on what the owners want. Owners go through 2-year iterations, and sometimes for us it's different levels of sizes of projects, but we're not putting out the same spec every time, and we're not starting a BIM and, oh, what's available? Oh, we got to put that in our specification. So we like to partner with, with the industry so that we can get the latest and best of what you do to save us money, selfishly, and so that we both know what each other do and want, so that, the contractors can save money because of how they do it. And the construction process can be quick and efficient so that a lot of stuff's known up front and the risk is out. Because if there's less risk, there's less, then you're not scared of low bid, because it's nice to see a cluster of bids when they're all around the same level. That means, innovation is going to win that job because of their processes, their skills, and their team. And that's what everybody wants to do. And fact of life is, people have to compete for lowest fees. And it's usually on the construction side and traditional design bid. But on the design side, we want to spend the money up front to do it right, to save money on the end, and take the risk out of the contractors so they can do a good job and everybody makes some money and we get a good product out of it. So yes, we're willing to spend the money up front and the time up front to design it proper.
Excellent. We're down to about the last 90 seconds. I still have another question, but I don't want to monopolize that. Anybody? Oh, Vincent.
Just with regards to, and I don't know who to address this on the panel, but generally, how close do you think we are to having, because as competitive as our industry tends to be, and we've talked a lot about risk involved in being open about what each firm is doing or each construction company is doing, we tend to keep things behind closed doors. So how close are we to having a government mandate that would require certain parameters of designing within a certain software or with a BIM process that would force a lot of people who will not adopt that process until they are forced? Maybe some who are more experienced with government clients that have that feel.
Right. What level of government? Municipal, provincial, federal, all?
All, because whatever the project, whoever is the client or owner, I think it has to be required. Some people just won't adopt, right, until they're forced to. So those projects exist at all levels of government.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any representation from multiple levels of government here today, as much as we tried to get some although, Samantha, thank you for being here, but they very quickly claim they're not owners' representatives. That's another whole conversation, the use of mandates, to move this forward. John, I'm actually going to ask you to stand up and talk about this for a moment. Yes, you. To answer the question, just because you are, in fact, government, tell us about your experiences up there in Parliament, up there in Ottawa. What's the level of conversation? I mean, and you can speak to D&D, DCC, but just your general awareness of what's going on, certainly at the federal level. I can talk a little bit about the provincial and municipal level here in Nova Scotia, but what about the federal level?
I work for the federal government, so it's hard for me to talk about an overall government mandate. I work with national defense. So if that's the level of government that we're looking at, we are looking to establish mandate around BIM. We're just making sure the timing's right with industry. We get challenged all times with, they're telling us industry's not ready. We can't go that route. We can't go with advanced technology. So they're really cognizant of the fact that they want to make sure that everybody's involved with it when we go into BIM as a mandate. So that's clear to that's the direction I get. We're about to run IPD projects. We have a target date where we want to start running projects within this fiscal year. We're looking for a project that'll kick off probably September timeframe and as an IPD project, and it's the very first one we've run. And that'll be our way forward, I think, after 2020. So we're going to learn from this project. In terms of overall government mandate, we have worked on, as we saw this morning, Eric's, the roadmap that we presented from Building Smart Canada. We have targeted engagement of government at various levels. We recognize that we need to go after the federal, municipal, and the provincial level. Each contribute to the mandate. We don't have one agency in Canada that would be, setting in a mandate. It's all over the place. So we have to make sure we get the engagement out there, get the right bodies talking, and then work towards, at least establishing those mandates. And I think we're a couple of years away from that yet. I have heard talk that at the federal level, there's discussions going on later this month, potentially with Treasury Board involved, where they're looking at possibly getting mandate or having mandate discussion. And the other area that we need mandate is actually from owners, like Arnold and others collectively. I think as owners, if there's a group, if they have a vested interest in an asset, then they can contribute towards developing an ad hoc mandate that we all kind of go the way road at BIM. So I hope that answers the question. Okay.
Can I jump in here on this?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah.
I don't know if a mandate is going to net value
Right.
necessarily, and I think that requires a bit of debate. I mean, the UK has created a mandate. It's really fuzzy if you look into it. There's no legal definition of it, and like a mandate wasn't required to get Atlantica to use BIM effectively, or Elliston, or many other major subcontractors and contractors all over Canada. It wasn't required to get many of the architects in this room and engineers to use the technology, and we're effectively using this technology without a mandate. And I think that if you make business decisions and that drives your motivation to pick up new tools, that's a pretty good reason to do something. And having a mandate that starts to specify and make a bureaucratic process that we all have to conform to can stifle innovation and actually end up costing money and inflating the cost of the bids that we receive from our sub-trades. When we go out to our sub-trades, we don't dictate to them their means and methods. We ask for them to work in 3D and submit 3D models, and their models have to represent what they're going to install in the field, but we don't tell them what software to use. We don't tell them how to do their job. That's their means and methods, and we want a competitive process, and we want our subs to be innovative. So I think the government has a role to play definitely with messaging, and leadership, and owners should specify deliverables, but poking around and dictating means and methods, you may not get the result that you want.
Right.
Profit is the best mandate.
Absolutely.
Can I counter that?
Michelle, sorry, go ahead, John.
Can I counter that, Tom? I love the debate. Sorry, I was expecting that response. We're not looking at the government side to say, hey, you have to do it structured this, and this. We want the benefits, and I think the whole industry together, groundswell, sets a mandate. So
what I'd like to
all
see
on
is the
board.
government to spend that time and effort and money, our money, and inject that money into innovation at grassroots levels and help small companies to buy software and implement these new tools and engage with students and academics and whatnot and do the R&D so that they can operationalize the use of the technology in their business. But it should be a business-driven decision, unless there's a bigger need. Like, for example, if the municipality wants to maintain, a 3D model of all the underground utilities across the entire city or something like that. I mean, that should be part of what they ask for, and they should mandate that. Government should mandate things like safety, absolutely. But means and methods around how we do our work, we're going to be as competitive as we possibly can, and you should help to drive competition, because these guys, their profit margins are going to go up because they're going to be more efficient, whereas the other guys around here that are more traditional, they're charging what they have to just to make a small profit.
Or we keep our margins the same and we take all the work.
Yeah.
Right, it's
That'll work.
one or the other. I think mandate's too strong a word. I think what the government has to do is set what their expectations for deliverables are, and that expectation of deliverable will help dictate the processes that we use and the products that we deliver. Like if they specify we need a fully integrated, 3D facility management, BIM-enabled product, that's the deliverable, and the people who are capable of meeting that deliverable will have the option to bid that work. I know what you're saying. You say certain people aren't ready, so it might remove fair and competitive processes, but I think there's enough of us now. This room was 30, now it's 100.
Here.
I think there's enough of us now that if you just specify the deliverable, we will use you'll get enough contractors, enough construction managers that can execute this in that style.
Yeah, if I could add too, if anybody is waiting on a mandate to make a move, they'll be way too late. It takes years to get there.
There you go.
And additionally, there's a lot of talk about waiting for an owner maybe to come along and want to foot the bill or whatever. The reality is there's owners all through the process. And, you know, in some cases, us as a contractor, we're the owner to a subcontractor. Maybe there could be some leeway to go this way versus that way. You know, same thing with design build, maybe working with certain architects, certain engineers. So I think that, you know, BIM is here. There's a bit of talk of, you know, BIM, we think this is the way to go. Well, it's clear. So anybody that's going to wait, I think that, you know, it's not a mandate. We're already here, basically.
We're way over, but I'm probably going to... Michelle, is Aaron still here? All right, so you get to answer this question. In your presentation, Aaron mentioned that on a recent project that you tendered for design, you said you had a preference for BIM, right, for consultants who would work in BIM. This might sound like a heretical question, but how did you communicate to the folks who would be responding to that tender what the reward would be? Because I heard Aaron say it was still low bid. It was nice that the low bid, you know, was awarded the tender. Was going to collaborate in BIM. But is there this notion that, okay, we're going to specify a preference as a way of moving and nudging the market along? What's the reward that you offer the consultants? Sorry, what was that?
I don't think there was any necessarily reward that
Right.
was offered. I didn't do the tender, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was just sort of...
So when you
written
say
out
there's,
that it
yeah,
was a
you know, there's a preference,
right?
well, that's great. Okay, so Crombie
in the
benefits
future,
by saying we have a preference for
Yeah,
that.
I think in the future, we will probably be moving towards, it will have to be in BIM,
Right.
rather than it's a preference.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious, you know, how do you, an owner can specify a
the
preference for
reward would be you
BIM, but
get
how
the
do you
job.
reward those? Yeah. Sorry?
I guess if it's a preference, the reward would be that would be the firm
Right.
most likely to
The
get
promise of
job.
repeat business, who knows?
Yes.
Right on. All right. Anyway, sorry to put you on the spotlight. I was just curious. All right, I'm way over.
Yes, David, you're way over.
Oh, sorry, Jerry. All right.
We got to move to a certification ceremony.
Yes, we do. All right. Thank you, panelists. Arnold, thank you very much. Steve, Tom, Ray, thank you very much.